The 5th century BC in Greek history is a period of warfare, sometimes called the century of warfare in Greek history because it was a period of 100 years of intermittent fighting, first between the Greeks and the Persians, then the Greeks turned on each other. The Persian Wars lasted from 499 BC to 479 BC, about 20 years, though the fighting was not continual in that 20-year period. The Persian Wars began officially on 499 BC when a group of Greeks who had settled in the Persian Empire called the Ionians rebelled with the help of Athens against Persian rule. The Ionian Greeks who had settled in Ionia, a part of Asia Minor or Turkey, which at this period in history was under Persian control, these Greeks who had settled there had done so voluntarily. As we have seen in previous lectures, the Persians were very open, tolerant, and merciful in their treatment of other groups, other cultures, other peoples, but the Greeks were not satisfied who lived in Ionia, who were Persian subjects. They wanted their independence. They were mostly opposed to the high taxes and tribute of the Persians. So in 499 BC, the Ionian Greeks, a small group, almost in a way it seems sort of silly to even imagine that they would try to go against the huge, vast, mighty Persian Empire. But they decided to do just that. In 499 BC, the Ionian Greeks wanted their independence from Persia, mighty Persia, bad enough to attack the Persian capital in Ionia, a place called Sardis. They did this with help from Athens. So in 499 BC, the Ionian Greeks, with help from the Athenians, not the Spartans, who were not interested in attacking Persia, burned down the Persian capital of Sardis. It took 9 years before the Persians were ready to respond to the burning down of Sardis. And when the Persians responded, it was not against the Ionian Greeks, but against the Athenians. In 490 BC, the Persian king, named Darius, led an invasion of mainland Greece at an area called Marathon. This area, Marathon, was located about 26 miles outside of Athens on a flat plain. The place was selected because it was a good area for movement of troops. So Darius and the far superior in number Persian army met with the Athenians in 490 BC at Marathon. For many, it was a foregone conclusion. Most assumed this would be a victory for the Persians. After all, they were the biggest and mightiest empire at the time, and who had ever heard of the Athenians at this point? But what is amazing is that the large, superior Persian army was outmaneuvered by a smaller and really, in many ways, inferior force of Athenians. The Persians found it difficult to maneuver against the Athenian war formations called phalanx. Essentially, the Persians were used to hand-to-hand combat, engaging on an individual fashion, but the Athenians fought in strict, rigid formation of 10 men wide, 10 men deep. They used their shields and their swords as if they were one fighting force. The Persians were outmaneuvered by the Athenians. Hired to report this news was an Athenian who watched the proceedings here at the Battle of Marathon, and when it was obvious to him that it was an Athenian victory, he took off and ran all the way back, that's 26 miles, back to Athens to deliver the message to the Athenians, who were held up inside the walls of Athens waiting for the news to know whether they needed to be ready for a Persian attack on Athens itself, or in the off chance that they might get to celebrate a victory. So when the messenger showed up in Athens with the news of the victory of the Athenians, he was winded, out of breath. Apparently he had not trained sufficiently for this kind of run. So when the gates were thrown open to this messenger, he made the famous statement, Nike, which is Greek for victory. So he utters the word victory, gives the great news to the Athenians, and then died. Today, a 26-mile run is often referred to as a marathon in honor of the battle between the Athenians and the Persians. In 480 BC, the Persians try their luck against the Greeks again, this time in a naval battle off the coast of Greece at an area called Salamis. The Persian king who leads this invasion was Xerxes. Xerxes launched a two-pronged attack, one on land, which was held off by Sparta and a group of 300 men under the command of a man named Leonidas. It's the famous Spartan 300, all of whom died in trying to keep the Persians out of mainland Greece by defeating them or attempting to defeat them on land, but they were unsuccessful. So the Persians defeated a Spartan army on land, but they themselves, the Persians, were defeated at sea by the navy of Athens. So to recap, in 480 BC, at the Battle of Salamis, Xerxes, the Persian king, was defeated at sea by the Athenian navy, but was victorious on land against the Spartans, who had provided a large army and leadership in the Battle of Salamis. Xerxes, however, was not able to make good on his defeat of the Spartans. Even though he had defeated the Spartans on land, he was pushed back out of Greece by the Athenians and their allies. So yet again, the Persians are defeated by the Greeks. In 478 BC, Athens allied itself with other Greek city-states, such as Delos, Samos, Chios, and Lesbos. This alliance was called the Delian League, and in 478 BC, the Delian League took war to the Persian Empire. The Delian League in 478 defeated the Persians on their own home turf. So in 478 BC, the Persian Wars came to an end with a final victory for the Greeks on Persian soil. In 478 BC, the Ionian Greeks were freed from Persian control. The Persian Wars were followed by the Peloponnesian War, 431 BC to 404 BC. The major figure in the Peloponnesian War, in which the Greek city-states would fight each other, was the great Athenian politician Pericles. Pericles lived between 494 and 429 BC. He was well regarded by the Athenians. He was a powerful political and social figure, the leading statesman and general in Athens' army. He shocked everyone by marrying a woman named Aspasia. See, Pericles could have had any woman that he chose. And he actually did have any woman that he chose. It's just the woman that he chose, Aspasia, was shocking to the Athenian people because she was a prostitute by profession. And prostitutes were frowned upon in Athens, even one such as Aspasia, who was actually considered to be a high-class prostitute or courtesan. The marriage was still shocking to the Athenian people. Pericles used a lot of taxpayer money to build a beautiful building called the Parthenon on the Acropolis of Athens in 447 BC. It was dedicated to the patron goddess of Athens, Athena. He used taxpayer money mostly to build the Parthenon as a house and a temple for the goddess of Athena, but it was also built by taxing the Delian League. Now, we may remember that the Delian League was an alliance between Athens, Delos, Samos, Chios, and Lesbos for the purpose of defeating the Persians. Pericles more or less turned on his allies in the Delian League and told them that They could probably expect at some point in the future that the Persians would attack again because they were humiliated by their defeats by the Greeks, and Pericles told the Delian League that if they would be willing to give him tax money and join up with Athens, that he would offer them protection from the Persians. So the people of Delos, Samos, Lesbos, and Chios gave tax money to Pericles, which he used to build the Parthenon on the Acropolis, and then found themselves taken over by Pericles. Pericles built for Athens an empire. He more or less, through diplomacy and fear tactics, got the people of Delos, Samos, Chios, and Lesbos to agree not only to pay him tax dollars for their protection, but to officially join Athens for their protection. This brought Pericles in direct conflict with Sparta. Sparta was already a bit anxious over Athens because, if you remember, at 480 BC in Salamis, at the Battle of Salamis, the Athenian navy was able to defeat the Persian navy, whereas the Spartans had been defeated on land by the Persians. The Spartans were, at this point, we'll just say, very aware of the growing power of Athens, and Sparta did not take kindly to having its military challenged. After all, the reputation of Sparta was that it was the greatest military power on the mainland of Greece. They did not want the Athenians challenging this. So as they watched Pericles build an Athenian empire, the Spartans grew more and more concerned. This concern led to tensions between Athens and Sparta, to growing problems diplomatically, and ultimately to the outbreak of war in 431 BC. This war is called the Peloponnesian War, and in it, many of the Greek city-states participated as allies of Athens or allies of Sparta. So from 431 BC to 404 BC, Athens and Sparta are fighting each other in a war. Now, the issue that they're fighting each other over really is who is going to be the dominant military power in Greece. Will it be Athens or will it be Sparta, the traditional military power? During the Peloponnesian War, there were some Greek city-states who were neutral, but most chose a side, Athens or Sparta. Athens' allies included Lesbos, Samos, Chios, Delos, Thessaly, just to name a few. Sparta's allies included Macedonia, Arcadia, Laconia, Boeotia, and surprisingly, Persia. Persia more or less had a bone to pick with Athens more than Sparta. Athens had defeated the Persians at Sardis, at Marathon, at Salamis, and then on their own turf in 478 BC. So the Persians realized that Sparta could be victorious against the Athenians on land, but they lacked a navy. Therefore, Persia gave Sparta a navy. So, to sum up a very long and complicated war between Athens and Sparta, Sparta won the Peloponnesian War in 404 BC, and this was largely due to the fact that the Spartan army was superior to that of Athens, but it also had to do with a problem in Athens itself. Athens fell repeatedly victim to a plague. What exactly this disease was, we're not sure, but it ravaged Athens during the period of the Peloponnesian War. Weakened from the plague, they were not able to sufficiently deal with this threat of Sparta. And in 404 BC, the Athenians had to surrender. So in 404 BC, The Peloponnesian War came to an end with a Spartan victory. So what is the importance of the Peloponnesian War? What is its major result? Sparta wins and proves to all of Greece that while Athens may be getting better militarily, it's still no match, and for that matter, no Greek city-state was a match for the army of Sparta. But it had a more important consequence as well, and that is that because of this 100 years of fighting, first against the Persians, then against each other, the Greeks were forever weakened. They never recovered from this period of warfare, and it made them ripe for takeover. And we'll see how, as a result of the Persian and Peloponnesian Wars, Greece was in such a weakened state that it was overrun by the Macedonians. That will be our focus in Chapter 4. That concludes this lecture on the Persian and Peloponnesian Wars.